Hey guys, it's Leah. Welcome back, or welcome if you are new, and welcome to my May wrap up, as always, from worst to best. I said last month that April was the best reading month I had, not only this year but in general for a really long time. Babe, this month might have topped it. I'm not gonna lie, this month was crazy. I read so many books that I fell utterly head over heels with that I would recommend to the ends of the earth, and I'm so excited to talk to you guys about them. So as always, a few stats before we start. In May I ended up reading 13 books, and guys, you're never gonna guess what. Every single one was on my physical TBR. I need giving myself a pat on the back for that. I don't think I've ever done that in my entire life. I had one reread, and I'm not gonna lie, one of the books I don't currently own, but I had it pre-ordered since last year, and it actually gets published in like a few days of me filming this, so it would have been my physical TBR anyway. So I am currently counting it as every single book that I read in May was on my physical TBR, which is kind of crazy, and I'm so happy about it. Out of the 8 books that I had on my monthly TBR for May, I ended up reading 5. I'm very happy with that. I definitely want to get into the swing of reading at least the majority of them, if not all of them, this month. I'm praying that I can read all of the books on my TBR for June. Last month I think I had a 4.02 star reading month, which I was talking about how I had never really had a 4-star reading month before, and I would love to get into the swing of doing that and just picking up books that I feel like I'm absolutely going to adore. And this month I did exactly that, because once more we had exactly a 4-star reading month, which makes me so happy. Guys, this month was crazy. I'm gonna stop rambling. Let's get into all 13 books, because I feel like we could be here for a while. It is an incredibly cloudy and stormy day, which for me is obviously quite cozy and perfect. However, for the lighting, it's not really going to abide by that, and it's not really going to go well. It's also, which is so crazy, this is my last wrap up in this backdrop before I move house, so kind of bittersweet, because these videos are some of my favorite videos to film every month, and next month of course we are going to have an entirely different backdrop. Hopefully the lighting will be better there, but yeah, anyway, stop rambling, let's get into the book. Before we get into the ranking of from worst to best, the one reread that I had in May was Mockingjay by Suzanne Collins. Last month in my wrap up I spoke about how I was doing a reread for the Hunger Games series, where I filmed an entire spoiler-filled reading vlog. That reading vlog was such a labour of love. It was so much fun to film, and I had such a great time rereading these books, because I went very much in depth into that vlog. That vlog is about an hour long. I'm gonna kind of spare the time here, so you can head to that vlog if you want to know my in-depth thoughts, but obviously I wanted to note that I did read Mockingjay. Onto the ranking, the worst book that I read in May was Liars by Sarah Manguso. I went into Liars having seen quite a few mixed reviews, but in the same breath I didn't really know anything about it. I didn't know what it was about. I just was craving a short literary fiction. I did listen to this one on the audiobook, and I'm not gonna lie, this book infuriated me to my core. This book pissed me off just pissed me off so much I literally just spilled my tea everywhere. Okay, let's put that down. I love an unlikable character. I love an entire cast of unlikable characters, especially in literary fiction, especially if it's I support women's rights, but more importantly I support women's wrongs. However, in Liars, babe, the man is the insufferable one, and I think that for me I could not get behind it, because men are slightly insufferable anyway, and in fiction that's not really what I'm looking for. In this we are essentially following our protagonist, who is in a marriage that she's not very happy in, nor is she feeling very fulfilled. This man does absolutely nothing for her. It's very much giving Housewife, where he does absolutely nothing but still has the cheek to kind of be an absolute dick, and I just couldn't really get behind it. It was not an enjoyable reading experience at all, albeit I will definitely say it's not meant to be an enjoyable reading experience, but I think that this entire scenario is my worst nightmare. This is hell for me, and I did not have a good time reading it. I did listen to the audiobook very quickly. I want to say that I finished it in a day and a half, so it's definitely quite bingeable and very fast paced. However, not a lot happens at all. I did really like the character development in this, especially when it came to our protagonist and her placing her wants and her needs elsewhere, and kind of being able to seek out a fulfilling life despite this man being an absolute dick to her. I just don't think it was an enjoyable reading experience. I personally wouldn't really recommend it all that much, which is sad, but it was a book that I ticked off of my physical TBR, so I can't be too mad about it, and I rated it 2.75. Next is a book that I actually am very sad that this is this low down on the list. I had never read a book by this author before. This is a classic, and it is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. I cannot believe that this is the second worst book that I read this month. This was my book club pick for my Patreon bi-monthly classic book club, and I know a lot of people did enjoy it. I was definitely in the minority, which makes me sad, but I don't know what it was. As I said, this was my first ever Jane Austen, and I very much went into this not really knowing what her prose nor her narrative styles were going to be like. I didn't really know what to expect. I feel like in some ways that was quite a double-edged sword, because I was very pleasantly surprised whilst also feeling slightly let down. I will say that I feel like I would definitely prefer other texts from her than this, which actually quite surprises me, because I went into this solely knowing that it was a gothic comedy and like gothic satire. Gothic classics are always, of course, my favourites. I did my dissertation on the gothic in classics, and especially the Brontes, and I love gothic classics so much, so I thought I was gonna love this. I thought I was gonna love the fact that Jane Austen is just ripping the shit out of gothics. I I just didn't. I think the saving grace with this was the main character, Catherine. The way that she was painted as this unlikely gothic heroine was so brilliant and so clever. I loved the satire in reflection to her character. However, when it came to the rest of the plot and the other characters, I could not really care less. It was quite boring in certain parts, which makes me so sad to say because, like I said, I love a classic. I love a gothic classic. Unfortunately, this one and I just didn't really click. I definitely want to read more Jane Austens. One day I would love to say that I've read all of her work, so if you do have a good recommendation of a Jane Austen that you think I might like, please let me know. But yeah, this one was just okay. I ended up rating it 3 stars. I did an entire spoiler-filled reading vlog on my Patreon if anyone is interested in that with more thoughts, but yeah, 3 stars, very middle of the road for me. Then we have the first fantasy of many for me. It is The Gilded Cage by Lynette Noni. I did read this in a reading vlog where I was finishing off some book series, so I'm not going to go too in depth with my thoughts here because I went very much in depth in there. However, this is obviously the second book in the Prison Healer series. This book was fun until it wasn't. The first half of this book, I was like, okay, I am 100% preferring it to the Prison Healer. I love a court royal setting in a fantasy, and this had that. I think our main character is so headstrong and so strong-willed in so many ways. However, I feel like she very much fell into the trap of making decisions, or rather stupid decisions, truly I should say, and then like when there are consequences to these decisions, she would be like, what? I think when it comes to characters in a fantasy book, for me, sometimes that is my biggest pet peeve, when they will make a decision that goes against their morals, but simultaneously when there are consequences to that decision, they don't understand it. I'm like, babe. Unfortunately with this series too, when it comes to the love interest and the protagonist, I do not see any chemistry nor tension between them. In the first book, there definitely was quite a bit of tension. However, when it comes to their romance, especially in this one, I just do not see their chemistry at all, and it makes it quite unbelievable in terms of the romance, unfortunately for me. I'm aware that this isn't like a romantasy. There are definitely grander, more important things at play in the fantasy aspect and the elements, which I really do like. However, the romance is a little subplot that I'm not believing, and I think it is slightly taking me out of the series. With that being said though, at the beginning, like I said, I was really enjoying it. I definitely preferred it to the first book in that first half, and then the second book really let me down. However, the ending of this I was not expecting, and I am very excited to carry on with the third book. I'm really not expecting, unfortunately, to fall in love with the third book, but I do definitely want to know how the series wraps up, especially because of the ending of this. So in the end, I rated this at 3.25 stars. I'm very intrigued for the last book. Another one that I am incredibly sad is so low down on this list. It is Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. I was terrified to go into it this month because I had seen so many mixed reviews, and in my opinion, unfortunately, those reviews are true and they do live up to what my experience was. I love Emily Henry so much, and I will definitely continue to read every single thing she releases. I'm hoping that this is just an outlier and it just, I don't know what it was. Unfortunately for me, it didn't really work. There are probably a couple of things that I could pinpoint as to why I didn't really like it. First and foremost, we are following 2 protagonists who are kind of fighting for the same job. They are both competing to write a biography for this really proclaimed celebrity who kind of disappeared from the limelight for a few years. There was a lot of drama surrounding her life, and maybe it's because I really dislike that trope. I really don't like in a contemporary setting when 2 people, and especially the 2 protagonists, are fighting for the same job, and that is why they have to be enemies. It just doesn't really work for me. I just don't really think it's entirely believable, nor the motives are quite believable. And I think that, paired with the fact that this is quite similar to another really popular book, and at the second that I started it, I was like, okay, quite Taylor Jenkins Reed-esque, and I could kind of guess where it was gonna go because of it. Normally that wouldn't really deter my rating for a book at all. However, especially when it came to the romance, I had seen, to be fair, a lot of people dislike this solely because the romance was kind of subpar to the literariness of it. I really like a literary fiction where the romance in importance is quite below the literariness. For me, that works perfectly. Some of my favourite romances are the more literary ones. That definitely wasn't the reason I enjoyed it less. I think when it did come to the romance subplot, however, I just didn't believe their chemistry at all. There was so much tension from the get-go. I think the way that Emily Henry writes tension is so superb and so juicy, and I just love it, and it always is so perfect. However, the chemistry with that didn't really match. I couldn't see the balance, and it just made the tension a little bit inadequate for me, unfortunately, and I think that that was one of the main reasons I didn't enjoy it until the 60% mark, when I started to see their chemistry. From the get-go, it kind of just felt like the protagonist only really was into him because he was attractive, because every other part of him, he was a bit of a dick, babe. And I was just like, babe, there is no way that you are that into this man from pretty much nothing just because he's attractive. And yeah, I just think for that, the tension didn't really match the chemistry until about 60%. I do still think that Emily Henry's writing was superb and amazing, but I think in terms of the plot and the characters, it just kind of let me down in comparison to her other books, which makes me so sad, and I feel like that is quite a general consensus, unfortunately. I do still have hope that I'm gonna love her next book as much as I have all of her other ones. This one, I'm just gonna say it was an outlier. outlier. I rated this 3.5 stars. From then on in the stack, we have books that I just completely loved so much and that I'm so excited to talk about, but the next book in the list would be Alone with You in the Ether by Olivia Blake. I read this one, I believe, in my 24-hour readathon for the month, and I love this so much. Every single month I do a 24-hour readathon with my patrons, and as part of that tradition, every single month they get to pick which book I start with, and they voted for Alone with You in the Ether, which initially I was quite daunted by, but simultaneously quite excited. This has been on my TBR ever since it was published, and I believe it was published in 2022, so it has been a good few years, and I was really happy that obviously I was held accountable to finally read it by my patrons. And oh my god, the fact that I put this off for so long and I loved it so much, it just makes me think of every other book that I've had on my TBR for like 2-3 years that could end up being like 5 stars. This wasn't a 5-star, but just in case, like sometimes I just put off books that I know I'm going to love, and this one was one of them. I absolutely adored this. In Alone with You in the Ether, we follow two protagonists who randomly meet each other in an art institution one day, and it's just following two unlikely strangers who are building some sort of friendship, relationship, alliance, whatever you want to call it, and they end up having like 6 conversations with one another. They only give themselves 6 conversations, kind of study each other and the human race, and they have these really philosophical and really bright and intelligent conversations that reading was so poetic and so beautiful. I think the way that Olivia Blake wrote these characters was phenomenal. I understood all of their motives. I found them so unlikable, but in ways that were so raw and so real. They were so incredibly different in so many ways, but when they came together, it was so believable. Not a single part of me didn't believe their chemistry nor their friendship or anything like that, and I think the way that she wrote it was just amazing. I think this represents more of a literary love story, and I just love those so much, especially when they have beautiful prose, and this was exactly that. I would definitely recommend this. I ended up rating it 4 stars. I just can't believe it took me this long to actually get to it. Next, we have another book that I read in my 24-hour readathon, and another book that I had on my radar for years, not quite as long as Alone with You in the Ether, but I'm very happy that I finally read it, and that is Written on the Body by Jeanette Winterson. I historically have both loved and hated a Jeanette Winterson. I loved Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. I hated Sexy and the Cherry. I went into this with high expectations because I know a lot of people love this one. One of my best friends has read it and absolutely adored it, and I will say I also loved it. This one was so interesting and so brilliantly written. I actually just think in general the way that Jeanette Winterson writes queerness and sexuality and womanhood and youthfulness so brilliantly. I will say off the bat, this one in the second half of the book, if the entire book was like how it was here, it would have been a solid 5-star, probably one of my favourite books of the entire year. However, the first half, it definitely took me quite some time to get into it. We are following a protagonist who is very much detailing all of the affairs she has had with women. I suppose in the first half we are very much following her be so aware while simultaneously also exploring her sexuality in terms of the way that she treats these affairs. She isn't the best person, and I think that unlikableness in the way that she would talk to people or treat people, I actually quite enjoyed. I think it was so real and so raw and was so honest. One day she then meets Louise and she becomes completely infatuated with her, but Louise actually has a husband, and then it's kind of just following her infatuation with her and the heartbreak and the melancholy, at times the kind of unrequitedness of love. It was just so beautiful, and like I said, the second half of the book had my jaw on the floor. It actually had me nearly crying on multiple occasions. The writing style was so phenomenal. The way it talks about the body and flesh and kind of wanting to consume your lover was just actually jaw-dropping. I don't really want to say too much, nor would I want to read too much, because it is a book that I would really recommend, but to give you an idea of the style of her writing and how beautiful it is, one of the quotes I underlined and loved so much was, "Here is the end of us all, but let's not look that way. While our bodies are solid and resist the slicing of the wind, let's not think of the deep mud or the patient ivy whose roots will find us out." Like, are you joking? The way that she writes, especially in the second half, I cannot stress that enough. The second half, 5 stars, but because of that, I did end up rating it 4.25, but it's one that I would thoroughly recommend. Another one that I would very much recommend, and was actually my book club book for the month of May, it is The Safe Keep by Yael Vanderwooden. I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I went into this with very high expectations because I'd seen so many people I trust and whose reviews and ratings have the exact same taste as me rate it 5 stars. I thought that this was going to be a 5-star. I will say it was not a 5-star. However, I cannot stress enough, please read this book. Please read this book. It was so good. I really do not want to say too much about this because I simultaneously do not want to give anything away at all, but it is very much a story that when you are reading it, you are aware of how beautiful the prose is, and you are completely encaptured by these characters and this plot, and you're finding it so beautiful, and you're like, okay, but what is happening here? And then you get to the second half and you get to the ending and there is a pin drop, and you just have to stare at a blank wall for about 2 hours straight because you just cannot believe that you didn't see all of this before, you just didn't appreciate hate it before. It is such an astounding story. It's so chilling and haunting in many ways. It discusses sapphic love also so much. It is so elegant and so beautiful in so many places. The main characters I fell utterly in love with in all of their unlikableness and their drama. And honestly, I feel like that's all I really want to say. Again, because it was my Patreon book, I do have a spoiler-filled reading vlog on my Patreon for it, but I cannot recommend this enough. Please read it. It is so worthy of all of the hype, and actually whilst I'm sitting here, I initially did rate it a 4.25, but I currently would probably lean more to a 4.5, but just please read it. It was incredible. You would not regret it. I loved it. A very different one from the rest of the stack. We then have a poetry collection, and that is Where Everything Is Music by Rumi. I had already established that I loved Rumi's poetry so much, so I'm not really going to touch upon it too much because it's also a tiny collection other than please read it. I honestly, to my core, believe that nobody writes about love, especially in poetry, the way that Rumi does. Every single line of his work is breathtaking and so phenomenal and so eloquent, and I just actually, it kind of gags me every time. There were so many poems in this that I fell in love with, and like I said, that speaks volumes because it is so tiny. I just love Rumi's poetry so much. I'm gonna try and read everything in my entire life. I don't know if that's ever going to be possible, to be honest, because he's got a lot of work out there, but I will say, even if you're well seasoned with poetry, still read it. Even if you have never read a poetry book before, definitely try and read it. I don't think it's too inaccessible. I think it's just so beautiful and so honest and so raw, and I just love him so much. So yeah, this one was a 4.5 star, which for a poetry collection doesn't always get that reaction from me. I loved it. Then we have another book that I read in my finishing series vlog, and I spoke to death about this book. It is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. Like millions of others, I've been waiting about a decade for Hamige's book, and I will say it did not disappoint. I fell in love with this so much. It was so special to return to this franchise as an adult with new text. I honestly think the way that Suzanne Collins writes is so real, unfortunately, and is so honest, but simultaneously is so important. And I know that, I think there was an interview once where she said that she only writes and publishes when she has something to say, and I think in our current political climate, this spoke volumes and was so powerful. I'm quite frankly terrified to see the adaptation of this. I have every hope that it's going to be phenomenal, but this was absolutely astounding. I loved this so much. I love Hamige's character somehow even more than I originally did, which speaks volumes because he's always been one of my favourites, but I will say, like, even all of the snippets and the reflections of the original trilogy were done so beautifully and with so much care, and I just absolutely adored this. But like I said, if you want all of my proper in-depth thoughts, then go watch that vlog. I love this so much. Of course, it was a very hard-hitting read. It was definitely quite graphic in places. I cannot even think about the adaptation and how much it's going to tear my heart out, but of course I adored this and I rated it 4.5 stars. Then we had the book that I said I had on pre-order, so it technically wasn't on my physical TBR in May, however I still read it. I'm gonna count it. It was Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. This was one of my most anticipated books for the entire year, and oh my god, I love V.E. Schwab so much. I would read absolutely anything she writes. I love vampire media so much, let alone when it's coming from one of my favourite authors. I adore their writing style so much, so I knew I was going to love this, but it still very much blew my mind. I again read it in a reading vlog. This is the reading vlog that I read it in, and in that you would see, if you had already watched it, that the entire time I said that this was a solid high 5-star read. I was convinced that I was going to rate it 5 stars up until at the very ending. The ending, unfortunately, I did not like at all, and it did definitely knock it down slightly. But in Bury Our Bones, we are essentially following 3 different women across various timelines and eras in all of their vampire, sapphicness, toxicity. It had a perfect balance of being so fun while simultaneously being quite heartfelt and raw and really real, despite obviously following supernatural creatures. I honestly think that the way that V. Schwab writes fantasy is so whimsical and so fairy tale-esque, like very dark, but in such an eloquent and unique way. It always has my jaw on the absolute floor, and I loved these characters so much. I loved following these characters so much. I honestly wish I could already reread it for the first time again. I do feel like this is one that I'm going to be thinking about for a really, really long time, and I just adored it. Like I said, unfortunately it didn't end up being 5 stars solely because I disliked the ending that much. I'm very intrigued to see if people are going to agree with me on the ending or if I'm going to be in the minority, but overall I adored this so much, and as much as it was one of my most anticipated books of the year, it really didn't let me down. I loved it so much, so I rated that 4.5 stars. Then on to my top 2 books that I read in May. I'm going to have to try and not ramble on about these too much because this video I feel like is already going to be so long, but the second best book that I read in May was Arcana Academy by Elise Kova. I was so excited about this, but did I think it was going to be this high up? Absolutely not. I had never read a book by Elise Cover before. I had always been incredibly intrigued, but the second that I heard that this had a magical academy, I knew I was going to love it and that it would have to be my first. This one does come out in July, so not too long to wait. I would definitely recommend pre-ordering. I would definitely recommend reading it as soon as it comes out because oh my god, any sort of fantasy that has an academy or a school setting I'm going to absolutely adore. But the magic system in this is also based around tarot cards and like the celestial, which is something else that I also absolutely adore. So kind of merged together and paired. Oh my god, it was actually bliss. It was perfect. I really adored Elise Cover's writing style. I think it was so accessible while still holding so much information. The magic system and the world building was phenomenal, and even when it came down to the characters, the found family in this, I utterly adored the main character. I was completely obsessed with her, and the love interest, oh my god guys, I need people to ride home for this book the way they did with Fourth Wing. I was so obsessed with it. I cannot believe, I can't even imagine, I don't even want to think about how long I need to wait to read the second book because oh my god, the way that this one ended too, I was obsessed with everything. This was so close to being a 5-star. I feel like I'm going to be raving about this one for a really long time. I just really couldn't get over the magic system nor the school setting. I think it was so nostalgic, was holding such uniqueness, and I just utterly adored it. I think if you love that sort of sub-genre in fantasy with an academy setting where it's like the curriculum but it's trying to kill you, please read it, especially if you love a good romance in a fantasy. This was phenomenal. I rated it 4.5 stars. I've been talking for so long, I feel like I'm actually going to lose my voice, but we're on to the last book and the best book that I read in May. Not only the best book that I read in May, but I simultaneously think it's the best book that I've read so far entirely this year. It is of course The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong. Like a couple other books that I read this month, this was one of my most anticipated books of the year, but this was like my #1 most anticipated book of the year, and when I tell you it did not disappoint. Anything from this author, anything from Ocean Vuong is the best thing in the world that's ever been written. I'm not joking. I'm obsessed with everything that he writes. The way that he writes, if you've never read a book by him before, oh my god, you are so lucky because you get to experience it for the first time, but simultaneously, what are you doing? Please pick them up. The way that he writes is so honest and so raw and so painful in that melancholic sense because of how honest and real it is, but in the same breath they are so eloquent while still remaining that beauty and the humanness of life. This one especially absolutely tore my heart out. I cried at the ending. I did also read this in a vlog and I was listening to the audiobook whilst ending it whilst doing my makeup, no less. Not a good idea, not a good look for me. And this book honestly is one of the most beautiful things that I've ever read in my entire life. I've watched an abundance of interviews of him talking about it, and every single time my jaw is on the floor even more than it was before. In this we are essentially following a protagonist who is 19 years old. He is sitting on the ledge of a bridge one night, and one day this elderly woman comes out of her house, convinces him to step off of the bridge, and it kind of creates this unlikely alliance and this unlikely friendship. It very much discusses the two different age ranges in society, the young adult and the elderly, and how they kind of do live on the fringes of society. Like one is not yet in their prime, one is past their prime, and when they kind of come together, the unlikely alliance that it causes in all of the ways that they are dissimilar but also very similar. It was so beautiful, and when I tell you it ripped my heart out, oh my god, I can't even think about it without honestly making me want to cry. I honestly truly do not think that anybody is writing today the way that Ocean Vuong does, and I'm endlessly gonna rave about his books. I'm gonna read everything he's ever published. Honestly, every single thing that he's ever released has been a 5-star from me, I think. I'm already begging for another one at this point. My camera is flashing because I could rave about this forever, so of course I rated it 5-star. Honestly, my favourite book that I've read in this entire year so far. But yeah guys, those were the 13 books that I read in May. If you have read any of them, please let me know what you thought about them, whether you like them or you dislike them. Are any of them on your TBR? Also, please feel free to let me know what was your favourite book that you read in May. If you want to show you stayed until the very end but you don't know what to comment any orange emoji. And yeah guys, thank you so much for watching and for spending some time with me today. I really hope you enjoyed, and I will see you again soon with another video.